Hello, friends. Welcome to the Tell It Like It Is podcast. I'm your host, Alexi Bailey, and I have a very special guest today. Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing good, Alexi. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for taking some time on Super Bowl Sunday to making this happen.
Oh, of course, I appreciate it. I'm honored that you even asked me to be on your podcast. I listen to podcasts and I always feel like it's very interesting people saying interesting things. And you asked me, and I said, "Wow, okay, why me?"
Listen, I'm sure you have a lot that you want to share and these kinds of things. How old were you when you came here?
To the States? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Oh, we're going back. All right. So I was 15. I moved here permanently when I was 15. But as a child, I went back and forth between Florida and Jamaica for pretty much the better part of my early childhood, just going back and forth. But then I moved permanently in when I was 15. So it's been a while.
Yeah. Where did you
I
go to high
crossed
school?
that barrier where I've actually lived in America longer than I lived in Jamaica like years ago.
Which high school did you go to?
In Jamaica, I went to Wilmer's.
And then here?
And then here, I was living in Florida. I went to Miami Palmetto Senior High.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So a lot of what I talk about on my podcast is basically how to make the world better and how people see things through their experiences.
Yeah.
And I realize that people have a lot to share and we've all seen a lot of things,
Yeah.
One of the things that I know you for is a big, beautiful family and your tremendous faith.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Both things are very important to me. Faith and family. I grew up in church. It's kind of all I knew for quite some time. But as an adolescent, and I think anybody that grows up in faith, no matter what their faith is, there's usually a point in your life in which you, I guess, adapt your faith for yourself versus it being a faith that you're just born into. So that didn't happen for me until much later in life, but just growing up, I've always considered myself to be a Christian man, coming from a Christian household. Was, just a big part of who I was for most of my life, and family is important to me. Family is extremely important to me. I come from a very unique family, also a very loving and caring family, and extended family, immediate family. It was very close. I know I said I spent some time going back and forth between Jamaica and the US, and so that presented its own challenges, being away from parents from time to time, but always felt like there was really tight family bonds. And that's something that has never really changed for me, even through life, like faith, family. Later in life, I added a couple other F's, fitness and food, but faith and family kind of were, definitely.
And how many kids do you have?
I have 3 wonderful daughters. So I hear a lot of people hear kids and they're like, children kids. My kids are women. They are ladies. 2 of them have already graduated college. One already graduated grad school. Wow. And I have another one that's in college now. So my girls, they're still my girls. They're still my McGiblets, as I call them. I don't know if they really like that, but I call them the McGiblets. Yeah, they're 25, 23, and 22. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, listen. So here's the thing, right? A lot of people, like, we're all in this life together. We're all having this shared experience. And you've seen a lot of people fall and stumble and I think you've kind of weathered that, whether it's using your faith or whatever. And, we all see the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what has been that the biggest thing that sticks out to you?
Life just keeps coming at you, I realize. I'm big on analogies, and I guess as soon as you started presenting that question, I just picture myself in a batting cage with like a never ceasing batting cage. The balls just keep coming, and some you knock out the park, some you kind of foul off, others you miss completely. But it's one of those things where you're not leaving the batting cage. Like, that's what life for me is. It's just, I won't say it's a constant struggle, but it's a realization that things are just going to happen, um, where you find that energy, where you find that drive to kind of be able to anchor yourself and hunker down. For me, as you've mentioned a couple of times, it's been my faith. I also have to admit that there are times when I couldn't honestly say that my faith was my my anchor. Like, I've strayed, I've come back. It's a constant journey for me, but just knowing or realizing that, okay, I hit this one out the park, that doesn't mean I'm going to hit everyone out the park, and there's going to be something else in life that's going to come. Just that awareness that things are going to happen kind of helps you to be able to persevere. I don't think anybody saw coming what we've been dealing with for the past 2 years. I mean, maybe, there are some people hunkered down that have dozens and dozens of cans of soup in their basement. They probably have expected something like this for a while, but myself, surely I didn't expect us to be a world, like a global event like we've been experiencing for the last 2 years. But even that, I just look at it as, okay, that's what came. Let's get through this. And not fooling myself into thinking once COVID's over, once this pandemic's over, then it's going to be smooth sailing for the rest of time. Like, I just know that there's always going to be something. And I think being aware of that and having that being a part of your reality just helps you to be able to face these things.
Joe, give me a quick second.
Yep.
Yeah. So how long have you been married?
So that is actually quite the interesting topic, which I
was ready.
We
haven't caught up in a while. So
we haven't caught up in a while. So there's probably
before you even answer that, right?
Yeah.
Marriage is a complicated thing,
it's quite the complicated thing. Yes.
Human beings, like, life is so complicated. As individuals, we can barely figure out ourselves in the continuum of time, and the batting cage is coming at you. This person has their own batting cage coming at them.
Exactly.
And it's like, as much as you want to pause your life and be there for them, you have your own things. There's so much happening,
There really is. And like I said, it's just, timing wise, you don't know what's going to come. You don't know. I mean, okay, so the batting cage analogy, you're going to have to tweak it to make it work, right? Because I've only been to a batting cage maybe twice in my life. And I know that you have fastball cage, you have slow ball cage, or I don't know if that's what you call it, slow ball, but you have each kind of pitch, you have a cage for it. In life, it's a big question mark, right? And all you know is that a ball is going to come and you got to try to hit it. You don't know if it's a fastball, slow ball, curve. You don't know what's coming. I will say this. I believe in marriage. I believe in the union of people coming together and creating a life together and making it work. I also believe that sometimes it doesn't, and that's a reality of life, a reality of experience. And your audience, your people listening in will be able to relate, possibly, to that
Absolutely.
experience
Absolutely.
of having to go through something, and possibly thinking, okay, this is forever, this is going to be, you know two people on a porch on rocking chairs, and then it doesn't turn out that
I
way.
think I think that the the image of marriage, like we have these images from movies growing up, you know,
Yeah,
and you said you're from the church, so early on in the church you knew the pastor who was like, oh, I've been married since I was 15, and
yeah, yeah.
these are the kind of marriages that we have somewhere in the back of our mind as ideals, right? And I always said that no one ever really explained to you like what being married was like. You just kind of saw the movie, you just saw the anniversaries, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, that was it. Also for me, just what I was exposed to, growing up. Like you said, most of the people that I knew in church had just been, the couples, especially that had been married, I just have always known them to be married. Um, I I could point to most, and when I say most, it's like almost 99% of my older people within my family, aunts, uncles, that sort of thing, that have been married and have long lasting to this day marriages. And so separation and divorce was not something I grew up around. It was always something that was kind of far off for people who weren't, you know, who weren't Christians, who weren't
Right,
of the
right, right.
faith. Um, and it was kind of seen almost as just this, oh, this new age, these young people, these people that want to, like, no, like,
They want to keep shopping.
it's right. The tradition is to make it work. The tradition is to stick it out no matter what. The tradition, like, this is what I grew up around. This is what I was surrounded by. And for a long time, myself personally, and even now, still pretty much believe in that. I don't believe in just winging it, or getting married on a whim, or getting divorced or separated on a whim. Like, I think these things are things that take really, like, deep concentration, deep thought, deep effort put into. But yeah, no, times are different, and just like, now you have all these reality shows that you're getting married at first sight, you're getting The Bachelor, like, all, like, it's made, like, we look at marriage now kind of like, it might work, it might not, and I don't think anybody should look at marriage that way. It shouldn't be so 50-50, or whatever the percentage is, that I think anyone going into it, and this is just my personal belief, should be of the mindset that I'm making a lifelong commitment.
Right. I mean, in a lot of, so basically, like I said, we're all going through this thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's learn as you go.
it sure is. It sure
And
is.
it's hard to tell someone who's 23, 24, 25 to make a lifelong decision.
Yeah, you could make that 21 for me.
Right.
So you, I look at I mentioned the ages of my girls earlier. My youngest is 22. My youngest is a year older than I was when I got married. I could not fathom her married. Like, I look at her and I just think to myself, not even I mean, maybe my oldest, but I'm not trying to say they're immature. I'm not trying to say that, they don't have what it takes, or they couldn't make it work, but just even it has to be maybe the fact that I'm their parent. Maybe other people may look at them and see something different. But when I look at them, I'm like, you are not capable of making that kind of decision. And don't get me wrong. I know that, depending on, like, even culturally, it's completely acceptable to get married at such a young age. There's different things that we can say and do about, you know, the right age, but Hertz won't let you rent a car before you're 25.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's something about just experiencing more life. So if you can't rent a Toyota for a day until you're 25, why? I guess what I'm trying to say is just the idea of being able to make such a long-term commitment, the maturity that goes into that, the thought that goes into that, the having just enough life experience to go into that to make it successful. Yeah, I it's tough if you're that young. Not impossible by any means, but definitely tough.
I mean, I think the reality is that the world is a lot bigger now than
Mm.
than when we were 20.
True.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
at 20, you were kind of like halfway to permanently being in a career, or at least you thought you were.
Yeah.
Nowadays, a 20-year-old is like, they're still debating if they want to go to school. Now you have a job, but it's not really a career. Like,
Yeah.
it's a different time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then, you it was easier financially to kind of say, I'm gonna just chip away at this mortgage and just stay here. Now
Yeah.
I think everything's so much more expensive that you're more transient. Like, I might need to go to Jersey, I might need to go here, I might, you're more.
Right.
So all of these factors are playing into what a 20-year-old has to deal with. The globalization has definitely changed the marketplace, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Growing up, yeah, like 20, I mean, it goes both ways, right? So if you were 2021 and halfway through a career, or had a clear vision in what you wanted to do, um, I think there still would be some sense that you are young and you're starting young and doing it young. But at the same time, when I think of 20-year-olds now and what they're exposed to and what they have as far as opportunities to enter non-traditional marketplaces, right? Like, so when I was younger, I mean, there were certain things that made money, certain things that didn't. It was, certain professions I was, speaking of. And this is also part of my West Indian upbringing is lawyer, doctor, accountant, that makes money. All right. And then perhaps if you want to be someone that works with your hands, you could be, construction worker or a pilot even is someone that I still consider to have worked with their hands, but those are like highly skilled. So you have to be either highly skilled or highly educated, and that's how you make your money. And then the digital age just completely changed that. I mean, you have 12-year-olds on YouTube making buku bucks. You know what I mean? So
My kids that every day.
yeah, so yeah, like it will change in some respects that, at a certain age, before you were considered to, need to be out there and need to have some semblance of a strategy for yourself for life, financially. But now people are making ways. Like it's unheard of the pace and the scope of which people are just creating these new pathways to be successful.
A lot of what I try to do here is kind of debunk some of the things that we think are that we're still trying to make a way to figure this out, right? I think for me, I grew up with a lot of conservative Christian messages, and
Yeah,
like you said, at some point you have to interpret it for yourself.
yeah, you do.
And I think a lot of people, when they try to interpret it for themselves, they see such a huge gap that they get turned off.
So I think the earlier you do what you're talking about, interpreting it for yourself, discovering it for yourself. I think the earlier you do that, the better off you are. How do I word this? So that gap is created by what you thought compared to what you know, right? And it happens not just in faith, but in everything. When I was growing up, things I knew about America, things I knew about the world, that's what I thought was the case. Once you are educated and you start to learn things and discover things and open your mind up to things, it's like, okay, now I'm presented with this truth. So you ask yourself, okay, what I knew before, was it a lie? Or was it just a partial truth? Or was it just my ignorance and immaturity falsely understanding something? And then you compare it. So the gap can be very small in some cases. The gap can be wide in some cases. I don't know if this happens to, I think I'm still unique for this experience, but when I was younger, every Black person that was famous was Jamaican. Okay. Like Michael Jackson was Jamaican. Okay. Like anybody that I couldn't perceive, that kind of became my truth. When I learned Michael Jackson wasn't Jamaican, there became this gap of, okay, but this is what I thought. And then I had to, okay, but did anybody tell you Michael Jackson was Jamaican? And I was like, come to think of it, no, nobody told me that. Like, I made that assumption because of my own little feeble mind trying to draw pictures around the world, like what do borders look like? What's the interrelationship of races? And like I said, if you were Black, I just thought you were Jamaican, but nobody ever told me that. So you take that and you broaden it to religion, you broaden it to politics, you broaden it to history. Like some of the things that we knew when we were younger, we were told. Other things we assumed to be the case. And so I think everybody should be on a path for truth. That's just me personally, to discover truth in themselves, truth in the world, truth in their faith, and be okay with things not being what they thought. And here's something that is, I was just recently thinking about, and especially with respect to faith, is this thing called deconstruction that I hear a lot of. I won't use the word millennial. I mean, maybe it's millennial. I don't know. I don't know who's deconstructing, to be honest. I don't know where that word came from. Yeah. I just know that it's a thing now. And I have a thing against things, and that may not come up, but it's a thing. What? So deconstructing your faith. So so I'll tell you my relationship with deconstruction and how I came to, be conscious of that. But it was all around, early 2020, when a lot of things were happening socially and globally that made us start to, really open our eyes. And I hate the word woke, so I won't really use it, but I'm trying to invoke that thought of being consciously now aware of something that you weren't previously aware of. Right. And so I think that when you start to really look into institutions and structures and break them down on just a factual level, okay, these things are just facts. Now, what did I interject into this to come away with the way I used to look at it or believe it to be, and what can remain? So with faith and deconstruction, a lot of people are having experiences in either specific churches or church on a whole, or just getting into a mindset of, everything that I've ever known since I was a child is all a lie, and I need to relearn everything. And so I think what I've done in that area of my life is to not necessarily just dynamite the whole thing to bits, but more so to look into it and okay, yeah, like this is a fact. Like there's certain things that I believe to be facts and certain things that I still hold on to faith-wise that are very fundamental and conservative
So
even.
what caused
But
the shift for you? What were some of the things that caused?
Wow. Honestly, when did it begin for me? I'm gonna say it began when so I recommitted. So start off with faith, right? I grew up in church, had that whole experience. My adolescent life from 15 on to well into my 20s and early 30s, I pretty much had my faith in my back pocket. It wasn't something I was living. It wasn't something I was outwardly expressing. It would come up perhaps on a questionnaire, or if someone directly asked me, Joe, are you a Christian? I would answer yes, I would answer affirmatively. But was it something that I was living, or was it a part of my life, or I was evangelizing? No, I wasn't doing any of that. But I did make a recommitment around in 2016-ish to just recommit my life to God, recommit my life to just living this out as like a very open and active part of who I am in my life. And that's probably how you even come to associate me with faith, is because even on social media and just everything I did, if I was into running, I was running for God. If I was into fitness, it was fitness for God. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was to just tie God into everything that I did.
Right.
Everything that I was passionate about. And at the time, it was fitness. And so I got introduced to this faith fitness group. And it was very structured and very organized. And we had to do some readings. And one of the readings that we had to do was Forgotten God by an author and pastor by the name of Francis Chan. Mm-hmm. Reading that book, there was another one as well, David Platt. It was called Radical by David Platt, and Forgotten God by Francis Chan. Reading these books gave me a new vision of, and I'll use my words carefully to not sound like I'm grouping, but Western religion, Western Christianity. It gave me a different view of it. Not to say that these people weren't a part of that institution, but they had a kind of this real look at it to almost like unveil it, or to pull this curtain back from what we went to experience on a Sunday, or what people would profess as parts of their life, to then make this comparison to, well, what does the word of God say, and what would it look like? What would these same institutions, what would these people's lives look like? What would your declaration of faith look like if it were just truly tied into the Bible, into the gospel? And that's when I started to see, that's the gap that you're talking about. That's when as far as my faith was concerned, that's where I started to see a gap. That's where what I was experiencing on Sunday felt like a different thing than what I was reading and feeling and being led to just in the Bible. And that gap, sometimes it was wider, sometimes it came closer together, sometimes it became wider. And I got to a point where I started to take really hard looks at church, at the institution of church. And I think right around that time, it started to coincide with everything that was happening socially in this country, with, the police brutality and the murders. And now everybody is starting to open their eyes. We're becoming more polarized, but at the same time, there's all these people trying to purport truth. And okay, this is what's true. It doesn't mean what you've experienced wasn't real. It doesn't mean what you experienced is not good or right. It just means that, okay, perhaps there's more to it than just what you knew. And so that's what led me into taking a hard look at my faith and how my faith and the institution of church kind of correlated. And so, yes, I hear the word deconstruction. I would never really say that I'm deconstructing, but there definitely are areas of my faith life that I have looked at and I wonder, okay, well, is that piece necessary? Maybe that piece is not necessary. Okay, well, is this piece really what the Bible says it is? Okay, well, maybe not. So I'm kind of reshuffling versus deconstructing different areas of my faith life.
So what was it that you saw in the vision that you got from, what was that? What were you seeing? Like,
I think the main thing for me was authenticity. There was a lack of authenticity. And certain things just, I couldn't reconcile certain things to be what they said they were. And again, I'm trying to be careful. I don't want to, I'm not going to name names or places that I've been to.
Let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. All right. So this is the Tell It Like It Is podcast. Okay?
All right.
But listen to this. Listen to this.
Go ahead.
So I think that religion is, if you look at my show, this is one of the topics, right?
Yeah.
How do we look at religion to reopen what we have and readdress this so that we can make the right shifts to fix this?
All right.
So it's not so much about, it's not so much about indicting someone specifically, but more generally, we can all say something is not working, right?
All right. So here's what I'll say. And when I remember that I'm borrowing from someone, I will try to credit. But I know one of the things I read in Francis's book was the idea of consumer Christianity, the idea that we were going somewhere to be entertained and for our time and money and resources to be spent. That's one of the things that I then had to, so I'm reading this book, I'm having these thoughts, and then I'm going to a church. So I had to look at the church that I was going to and ask myself, well, does this fit into that characterization that I was reading about, these thoughts that I'm starting to have? And even prior to reading these books, I did already start feeling like, okay, something's not right here. We're a church, but it feels like a show. And it's set up very much like a show, from production to green rooms to, black cars and Suburbans pulling up front with it just felt like this doesn't feel just like this authentic Christian family bonding over the things of God and wanting to go out into the world and help people. This feels more like a machine, like something's fueling this, something's generating this, something's being done here. And I couldn't tie it into like what I just thought the Bible was telling us to do and to be as a church and as individual Christians. And so that's what happened with me. And I feel that it's something that's prevalent, but I feel more and more people are waking up to it. And this is where I'm so careful to start talking about things like deconstructing, because I know that there are people that are hurt. I know there are people that are finally looking behind the curtain and seeing the machine at work and throwing everything away, throwing away their core beliefs, throwing away their their convictions, throwing away things that they've even experienced in a spiritual sense, to now just question everything. And I believe certain things can and should be questioned, but you don't scratch everything to start all over. You know, if there's a, I don't know, if there's a part of your faith that needs to be looked at, then look at that part. You know, if someone has cancer, you remove cancer. You don't remove healthy organs and tissues. You know what I mean? And so there's certain things that need to be looked at more critically from within. And like if we individuals, like we look at ourselves, like, are we entering into church as consumers, and is church presenting themselves as something to be consumed?
You've had an awakening now. You've re-energized. And what is it you're looking like you want to do? What is this? What direction are you moving in?
Right now I'm moving in a direction of authenticity. Right now I'm moving in a direction of, if something is real, I'm drawn to it. Right now I'm moving in a direction of church being simpler, church being, and by simpler, I don't just mean smaller, but I just mean simpler. So I'm moving in that direction. I have attended house churches in the past. I am considering re-entering that space of either, I don't know, I'm careful to say starting, but at least attending a simple gathering of just people who believe in God, people who love Jesus, and people who want to make the world a better place. Like, I don't think that, which I believe is a core message, takes, a gazillion, video screens and, teleprompters and stuff like that. Like, it to me, that feels, imagine you're at a show, right? And someone is lip syncing and you find out they're lip syncing. Even if that person can genuinely sing, the idea of like that feeling of disappointment, that feeling of, oh, wow, was that real? When you discover the person was lip syncing, it's like, now you're not so sure, Right. And that's what I feel like I've witnessed and seen. I've seen a lot of lip syncing. I've heard a lot of lip service. And so it's left me in a place where I may be a little bit more skeptical than I should be. But at the same time, I believe that God has guided me to this place and is going to use me for a purpose that perhaps I can't see right now.
So let me say this here. The podcast that I'm doing right now, it's really one tool that I'm using to build community.
Yeah.
Because I feel that we have a lack of community and a need for community.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess promotion, but before you start something, you want to talk to people and get a sense, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely what it is I'm doing. For me, I think that church is more than the service.
It sure is.
A lot of people rate a church based on the service.
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely is. People use words like big C, little C church. Like, for me, like, it's just church. Like, I wish that there wasn't so many different versions of it.
Nomination.
Like, it's hard to feel unified in something that's so divided, and something that at its core should be unified. I think I read somewhere, and I have to fact check this, but I read somewhere there's 30,000 denominations. Like, why? Like, if there's like, it just is like, why so many? 10, 20, 30, 100. Like I don't know what an acceptable number is, but I just know that something that is unified shouldn't be that splintered. So that's one area. And then another area is just the area of service. It's, what does this church do for its community, for the people around it, for the people in it even? I mean, there's some churches that there's such a divide in resources between what goes to the church and the leadership of the church and what's available to the people that go there, that it just feels, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like it should be that way. It doesn't feel like anything or it doesn't resemble anything I've read in the Bible. It doesn't represent what church look like in the Bible. And I think right now what a lot of people say is, oh, well, a lot of things don't look like what it looked like in the Bible. But for me, it's less of, I'm not just thinking of the physical attributes of it or logistical attributes of it. I'm thinking of the spirit of it. If the spirit of it is supposed to be caring, if the spirit of it is supposed to be giving and nurturing and welcoming and that strong sense of community, like you're talking about, then where is that? Where is that evident? Where is that seen as the core thing or the core value of what a church is? And I'm sure there are plenty of churches out there that are like that, but I think there's a vast majority of the more visible or known ones that are not necessarily like that. And these are the ones that the world sees. So the world then creates their opinions of church based on the ones that are most visible for them to see. So
for me, I think that, as a human being, I'm called to do good in the world. And for me to do good in the world, I can do what I can as an individual, but being raised in church and being told that we are a community and we're in this together and we are God's hand in the world, I always took that seriously.
Yeah.
So as I matured and I got more of a critical lens of what's happening, I was able to say, well, guys, I don't think we're really doing that the way we said we are, as much as we could be. Like, look at all of these things, the same things you're mentioning, that we could be addressing to fix our effectiveness. So little by little, I became aware that the problem is really, really big. So a lot of people use church as a business.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna fix our ability to be effective Christians, we're gonna have to call that out.
Yeah. So I think I do that in my very small way with people that I'm intimate with. The one thing I try to do is keep it within the family. And by that, I mean, any tight-knit family, any tight-knit community knows that when there's issues, we address them in-house first. And this may conjure up very negative thoughts of people, for people, I should say. And I'm not saying cover up, okay? So I'm not using that veil, like things that are wrong and innately wrong and legally wrong should be called out, period. I think what you and I are discussing now is something not so obvious, something not so not so sinister. I think we're thinking more critically of the way the organization run or the things that are being done. I mean, I hear you. Like, there's things that need to be called out. I just feel like we need to be careful of who's listening and who's watching and how a non-believing world may interpret what we do.
I think we're past that, Joe.
You think so?
I think so. Everyone knows that pastors are flying on private jets. They're driving Rolls
Yeah.
Royces. Like Olstein owns a giant stadium. Like we're past that. Come on, keep it in house.
No, so all right. So maybe I guess what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say protect what we're trying to protect. In other words,
But here's the
don't
thing,
just
though.
throw a stick of dynamite in it, and then
No, no,
when we've
no, no,
blown it up, we have
no.
nothing left to go
So
back to.
I
Yeah.
think we're past that. The churches are empty, Joe.
Jeez. Alexi, I've been out of the game for a while. Like, what's going on?
The churches are empty. I'm not like you're almost saying it like, no, 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 let's not damage the image of the church right now. And I'm saying like we're past that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
So
No,
I'm more saying how can we rebuild it? We don't even have to talk about what's wrong anymore. We can right now this conversation is well, I'm all about solutions. Like what can we do to rebuild it, you know? And
so here,
we need to first of all we have to be very clear and call out what's wrong, right? So that
right.
so there's a people out there who still going to church and they kind of think they're let's say they're 5 years behind you. They're
Mhm.
going to church and they're like, something doesn't feel right. So when if they were to hear this would help them have some clarity to say, I am feeling that. Yes, that's one thing. But then at the next point is those people are gonna say, well, what can I
What
do?
they do. All right. So here's where I feel, what I feel passionate about. Um, I think the pandemic came at a time that the church needed something to disrupt it. You're talking about churches being empty. I think churches were emptying for the reasons that we initially talked about, but then I think they literally became empty for reasons that were beyond their control. And I don't think that was it's just an occurrence or it just happened to be that way. Um, I think that it's definitely a time that most people who attended church, whether knowing something was off or whether loving what they were doing, had now an opportunity to look critically at what they were a part of and ask themselves, okay, how necessary is this? How real was this? Like, now that it's disrupted, how should we rebuild it? Like, how should we fill it? And I, if what you're saying is true, and I mean, you know, I would look at numbers to say, okay, a church is empty, but let's just say they are, right? Then how
Not
do you refill
literally,
them?
not
And I'm saying,
literally, not
I know,
literally.
but they're
The
getting
numbers
less.
are
Attendance is falling. Yeah, attendance is falling. So here's my suggestion to anyone that's listening to this that may feel themselves in a similar space, like they're starting to think, like they may have even heard the word deconstruction. They may start to question their faith. I would tell them, keep your faith intact. First and foremost, keep your faith intact. There can be something wrong with what you're a part of and nothing wrong with your faith. Everybody should have good, sound theology. And so you go to the Bible for your theology. Yes, you have spiritual leaders that will help you decipher what you're reading, but let your faith be intact. Your faith is not at being attacked here. The institution of church does need to be looked at critically. And I think if we knock the business out of it and it's no longer a business, but the Bible tells us that people will use godliness for their own financial gain. So if we now start to think, okay, well, if we're building something or rebuilding something, are we doing this for financial gain? Are we doing it for an individual's financial gain or a group of people's financial gain? If we start off with we're not doing it for that reason, the purpose of this is to serve a community, the purpose of this is to preach the good news, then what do we need to build a community? What do we need to preach the good news? Take those things and make those things the main things and forget about like rock climbing walls, forget about skating rinks and parking lots, forget about bowling alleys, forget about all these, forget about fog machines, forget about, like, we don't need some of these theatrics to just attract people in. Like, we're supposed to be a hospital. We're supposed to be a community that can move in such a way that the world will notice us by the way we're moving, by the way we're loving one another and loving those people around us. It never was the world will know that we're Christians by our music. Nowhere does it say that. It doesn't say the world will know we're Christians by our cathedrals. Nowhere does it say that. What the Bible says is the world will know we're Christians by our love. So if we're living lives that are loving each other and loving those around us, and then using our resources to further that cause, then I think the rebuilding of it, the restructuring of it will look a lot different and be way more authentic and closer to what the Bible says it should be and should look like. So I'm with you. I mean, I'm not, and I wasn't trying to like pitter patter around it. I mean, there are certain, like I'm very protective, and that's probably what you heard, like of, because people are not everyone is as inept or ept, what's the word? Not everyone is as intellectual to be able to separate fact from fiction, right? And so a lot, to use like, you know, what the world says a lot is don't throw out, you know, the baby in the bathwater.
Yep.
And I think that that's what a lot of people end up doing when they start to deconstruct, or when they start to ask themselves, well, you know, what's wrong with this whole picture, is they want to just throw everything out. And I'm so cautious and hard on myself, even to where I don't want to be part of anyone's walking away, that I would probably be even more cautious than I ought to be. But I think it's coming from a good place though. It's not head in the sand at all.
So let's take a quick break.
Cool.